Hello, one and all. This is my recap and review of Soma Spider So What? Volume 13. And I'm so excited making this video today for a few different reasons. First off, right before recording this, I found out that I just hit 3,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much. You have no idea how much I appreciate the views, the likes, the comments, the subscriptions. It means the world to me. It absolutely means the world to me, and it's really what keeps me going. So thank you all so freaking much. But anyway though, secondly, I'm happy to be covering this volume because I actually finished this volume for the first time about a year ago. And then somebody commented under my video, hey, why don't you make a video covering all the volumes of Soma Spider So What? And I said, sure, why not? How long could that possibly freaking take? Turns out, long time. Turns out a really freaking long time. But I'm finally caught up, and I'm finally able to move on and read volume 14, and I cannot freaking wait for that. But also, I'm just happy making this video because I really do love this volume, and it contains what might be one of the best twists, maybe the best twist in this entire series. And that is really saying something when the very title of the series is foreshadowing one of the greatest twists I've ever seen of all times. Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. But I'll be talking about that a bit down the road. First off, let's talk about how this volume opens up. And it starts off with Vampy, Mira, Wrath, and the Puppet Spiders fighting off a legendary monster, a giant ice whale. Or maybe it's a worm, or maybe it's Kirby. It's basically, a giant mouth with little nubby arms and legs that's swallowing everything around them. So, yeah, it's basically Kirby. But either way, it is a threat that could wipe out an entire nation, but thankfully it just doesn't, because that's how monsters are programmed. Basically, when they're born or when they're bred or whatever, they're programmed to kill humans. That perpetuates cycle of killing and dying that keeps the system well fed, keeps the world from, falling apart. Huzzah! But then, after a certain point, monsters become so strong that humans have absolutely no chance of defeating them, even if they gathered up, a whole freaking army. So the monsters are programmed just to, go off and hide somewhere far beyond the reach of humans, far beyond the reach of demons. Huzzah! And when White finds out about this, she realizes, hey, that means that there is a bunch of juicy energy being stored in these unkillable monsters, so let's go kill them! And this provides, a lot of benefits for her and her team. For one thing, it lets her team level up, gives them the experience they need. For another, it gives energy back to the system, which keeps the world from dying. And finally, it provides food for her clones. Huzzah! White really doesn't waste a thing. But anyway, though, we then flash over to Fort Oaken, which Miss Boo's managed to conquer through the power of revenge monkeys. Unfortunately, though, those monkeys end up setting up shop in the fort, so she's now on monkey watch to make sure they don't attack the demon nation, though she is absolutely thrilled about this since it keeps her far away from the capital and Ariel. Unfortunately, though, this vacation of hers is ended rather abruptly when Felmina pops over and takes control of the fort, and then she and the rest of the 10th Army murder all the monkeys very, very quickly. Which is not, too surprising given that they're wearing impenetrable armor crafted by White, or wielding overpowered weapons forged by Wrath, and have been trained personally by White. And this training was just so seriously, overwhelmingly intense. Though it kind of had to be given the 10th Army was made up of, the rejects, fresh graduates, problem children, and people with messy situations who have nowhere else to go. So White has to give them a good thrashing until they obey her. And this means that early stages of training involve White teleporting them directly into swarms of monsters who were just weak enough not to kill them. Though she did end up messing up the calculations a few times, and some of the soldiers came very, very close to death. And this was just the beginning. This was just the start of the training. In fact, this was to raise up their stats enough where the actual training wouldn't freaking kill them. Holy mother of God, White is intense. She is seriously, seriously intense. And then once they finished training, White put them to work assassinating elves. Huzzah! And as for Felmina herself, the basically second in command of the 10th Army, there's a very interesting line in this chapter where White describes her father, the previous leader of the 10th Army, who disinherited her after she ticked off Sophia. Now, according to Felmina, when her father disinherited her, he looked completely and utterly disinterested. But according to White, he actually begged on his hands and knees for White to take her in and look after her. Now, obviously, White isn't always the most trustworthy narrator, but I do think she's telling the truth here. Now, differing perspectives is a huge part of this series, especially this volume, as we see Shun's storyline from fresh eyes. So, while Femina likely views her father as a cold, uncaring man, he truly does seem to love his daughter and wants to protect her however he can, even if he can't admit that publicly for whatever reasons. And in this moment, he actually made the best possible choice for her because she is absolutely thriving under White's tutelage. She is a terrifyingly gifted assassin, and she's also quite good at giving orders, doing paperwork, and managing communication. All the things White really, really isn't good at. So yeah, she has found her perfect spot inside the 10th Army working for White. Huzzah! But anyway, though, for now, they've won back Fort Oaken, and it's time to head off to the Annelite Kingdom, home of both the former hero Julius and the current hero Shun, because they need to burn it to the ground. For reasons! Some very, very good reasons. And one of the main reasons is that Shun, now that he's become a hero, is an absolutely insanely, massively huge threat to their plans, because the hero can't lose to Demon Lord. That's like a rule of the system, and to make sure that rule is followed, the system will provide energy to the hero to make sure his stats match the Demon Lord's or exceed the Demon Lord's. And that is a bit of a problem right now because the current Demon Lord is Ariel, and in order to match her stats, Shun may be given so much energy that it might, just instantly destroy the world right then and there. So if Ariel and Shun fight, that's it, the world dies. Game over. Holy mother of God, that's a problem. That's a very, very big problem. And this is also the reason why White killed Julius and tried so hard to erase the hero title from the system itself. Unfortunately, though, that plan failed, and she also failed to get Julius to use up the Sword of the Hero, a weapon that can kill even a freaking god, and to make things just so much worse, that sword has also now fallen into Shun's hands. So yeah, Shun is a threat. Shun is an absolutely insanely massive threat. But perhaps most concerning is Shun's unique skill, Divine Protection, which makes the results he wants more likely to happen. Huh? Seriously, what the freak does that even mean? That is insanely, overwhelmingly vague, and White ends up spending the rest of the volume wondering if everything that happens to Shun was the result of his skill or just dumb luck. At one point, she even wonders if his ever-growing harem is the result of divine protection or not. I kid you not. I kid you not. So, yeah, basically the skill makes him an isekai protagonist. A truly, truly terrifyingly and overpowered ability. And because of those reasons, and a few others, White decides she needs to destroy the kingdom, just real quick. We then flash over to Sophia, who is in the midst of making that plan come to fruition, and she is, really struggling with how annoying and pompous Hugo is, but she decides that she can't get too mad at him because he is just so overwhelmingly pathetic. He thinks the entire world belongs to him and everyone is dancing in the palm of his hands, but he is completely oblivious to the fact there is a spider in his brain which is controlling, well, not his every action. He seems to have some free will, and he thinks he's in control, but he also just does whatever Sophia orders him to while thinking it is his idea. So yeah, he is a puppet. He is an absolute and complete puppet for White. Oh god, poor Hugo. Honestly, poor Hugo. I mean, he sucks. He really overwhelmingly sucks. But even he doesn't deserve this. And while this is going on, Sophia also has to wonder, hey, is there a spider in my brain right now? I mean, whenever White tells me to sit, I'm unable to move, and my head ends up, flying into the ground. Is that because there's a spider in my head that's making me do that? And that is a very, very serious concern for her. But anyway, though, regardless of all this, Sophia does actually end up showing a bit of growth this chapter. First, obviously not killing Hugo, and secondly, at one point she starts getting jealous. She gets lost in thought man, White is so overprotective of Ariel. I wish she was that nice to me. And that triggers her envy skill, but she's able to resist losing control like she did when she was a child, because she has been practicing. And while she hasn't yet obtained heresy nullification, she does have heresy resistance. So, good for her. It's a small step, but I'm glad she's moving in the right direction. Though this scene does take place just seconds before she forces Sue to kill her own father and frame her own brother, and she seems, pretty cold about that. In fact, she actually mocks Sue for it later on, so yeah, Sophia still kinda sucks. Anyway, though, speaking of sucking, we then have Prince Silas, someone Sophia describes being a dull, pathetic man with nothing of note about him except his pride. And that does line up with what we were told about him before. He is basically just average, and he can't live up to his exceptional brothers, and his mother's putting just some serious pressure on him to make sure that he gets the throne. But anyway, though, then Sue murders her father in cold blood and frames her brother. Very sad. Thankfully, though, Miss Oka arrives and saves the day, just as Sophia planned, and Shun is saved, just as Sophia planned. And as for Silas, Hugo decides to brainwash him. Kinda. I mean, actually, he can't brainwash him normally, because he's already being brainwashed by somebody else. And so is the king, and so are most of the important nobles in the country. So in order to control Silas, Hugo has to destroy his spirit to take control of him. And as for who exactly is doing all this brainwashing, I mean, do you even need to ask? It was Potamus. Obviously, it was Potamus. He had basically conquered this entire country without anybody noticing, and was trying to make Shun king to keep him out of the church's hands. So, yeah, that's why White had to kill the king and arrange this insanely massive coup. She was actually saving the country from Potamus! Yay! I mean, kinda. This whole thing is definitely still, a bit morally gray, especially since she had Shun murder her own father to get this done. But either way, Sophia kills Potamus's temporary body, and it's pretty irked they didn't fight back, so she decides to go play with Miss Oka. And speaking of Miss Oka, we then get a flashback chapter of her last encounter with Sophia, and it was not a pleasant experience. Basically, Sophia murdered Miss Oka's entire squad of elf soldiers, including a summoner who brought out an S-rank monster, the equal of a lesser dragon, and Sophia crushed it in one blow, and then killed the summoner, and then killed all the rest of the elves. And then had a rather dark conversation with Miss Oka, basically accusing her of pitying her back in Japan, and Miss Oka, can't really fully deny it. But then, just to be a jerk, Sophia says a bunch of ominous stuff about them not working with the demons, instead being on the side of the administrators, which is a bit of a lie, I suppose, though it is also kind of true, given that White and Black are pretty much the only administrators left in this world, and Sophia is kind of on their side, but still, that just made the situation much worse, so maybe not the best move. And, maybe Sophia hasn't really grown as much as I was hoping. Oh yeah, and also Liz line, Miss Oka is utterly and completely convinced that Sophia just managed to recruit Hugo in like the last week or two. Which I found just weirdly hilarious. I mean, this girl has absolutely no idea what's going on with anybody. Even the timeline she has is just way, way off. But anyway, that let me flash back over to White, just feeling, just a tad guilty about destroying an entire kingdom, but she's able to justify it fairly easily, given that both Hugo and Silas wanted revenge and would have gotten it with or without her. In fact, it might have been even worse without her. Plus, Potamus was controlling the entire kingdom, so that justifies basically everything she did. I mean, kinda. Anyway, then now she just needs Shun and his team to run away and hide until she's finished killing the elves. But before that, Shun and Kanata need to have their epic emotional battle, and White kind of gets, really bored watching it, because while they are just, really giving it their best, they are just miles and miles below what she is capable of, and because she's so bored, she doesn't notice Kanata blowing herself up until it's too late, and then she starts to panic. Thankfully, though, Shun has the mercy skill, which can raise the dead, and White knew that somebody had that skill, but she wasn't exactly sure quite who had it. And it is a just insanely terrifying skill, as it's the only thing in this entire world that can raise the dead. But each use raises a person's taboo level, and once it's maxed out, you're bound to realize what it really means to bring back the dead. Which is just such an overwhelmingly ominous and terrifying line. I'm not exactly sure what it means. Best case just means that you're stealing energy from the system and hastening the apocalypse. Worst case, I don't know, and I really don't want to think about it. Either way, White declares that D is a sick and evil god for deciding at Mercy to act this way, before deciding that she is going to kill a bunch of Shun's loved ones and force him to max out the taboo skill, and learn the horrible truth of the world. So yeah, White's kinda awful. And speaking of awful, Vampy then shows up to attack Shun and his team, even though the plan was to let them escape. And then Felmina and Wall join the fight, and things aren't looking good for Shun until Faye flies in, sets Wall on fire, which he definitely deserves, and saves the day. And White can't help but wondering if this fortuitous timing was all the result of Shun's divine protection. But regardless, Felmina and Sophia are punished for attacking Miss Oka, though for the sake of their dignity, White doesn't go into the exact details of how she punishes them. Though in the past, she has stripped Sophia naked and hung her upside down all night. So yeah, that's probably what's happening here. And she has ended up going a little bit light in the punishment because she is actually impressed that Sophia was able to put Miss Oka into a 15-day coma. Because, I mean, first off, it was just a really smart move. It's really going to slow down Shun and the rest of them. And secondly, White didn't actually even know that coma status effect was a thing and has absolutely no idea what skill could even cause it. So yeah, it turns out the system is much bigger than even White knew about. Who'da thunk it? Regardless, though, this gives them time to attack the elves while keeping Miss Oka safe and very, very far away. Unfortunately, though, the plan to attack the elves kind of falls apart quite badly because White figured, okay, no, we don't have to worry about travel or anything like that. I'm just going to teleport the entire army directly into the elven forest, since there is absolutely no way we could just march through human territory. But then the pontiff tells them, hey, you can march through human territory. Which is something they requested, but this wasn't even a serious request. It was a bargaining tool. They wanted to ask for something just so utterly and completely ridiculous that you'd have to say no, and then you'd have to compromise on something else. But instead, he freaking said yes! He found a way to let an entire army of demons march through human territory without anybody noticing or attacking. Holy mother of God above, the pontiff is just so utterly terrifying, and I so love how the series has made such a weak man able to stand shoulder to shoulder with literal monsters. And just to really hammer that point home, he then says to White, a literal freaking god, I won't accept failure as an outcome. Understood? And she is shaken by this. A god is shaken by the words of a man. Oh, it's beautiful. It is so freaking beautiful. But anyway, though, because of this, White now has to prepare for an actual march to the Elven Forest, so that sucks for both her and all the other commanders, including Wrath, who is not having a particularly good day. First off, he has a taboo skill going off in his head day and night, saying over and over again, atone, atone, atone. Which, you know, for the people of this world is a nice reminder that you killed the goddess, you destroyed the world, you must atone. Though it doesn't really apply to Wrath all that well, given that he is not from this world. He didn't actually sacrifice the goddess. Though then again, at this moment, he is currently writing condolence letters to the families of soldiers who died under his watch, and has spent the last few days collecting their corpses, all while remaining completely and absolutely emotionless, so, you know, maybe needs to tone just a little bit. And this has taken a serious toll on him, and Mira as well, though more mentally than physically. I mean, their stats are absolutely freaking insane, so they don't really get tired all that easily, but still, they are mentally shot. And as for the rest of the commanders, yeah, they aren't quite as monstrous as Mira and Wrath, so they are physically just completely and absolutely worn out, and they can barely even move. And this makes things more than a little awkward when Ariel walks in the room and announces they're moving up their plans to attack the elves, and therefore everybody needs to do a whole lot more work. Oh god, the poor commanders, the poor commanders. But thankfully, everybody pulls together and they make it work. Kinda. I mean, Miss Boobs is helpful in getting stuff done, but absolutely refuses to send troops. And Kogu, the gentle-willed giant, he refuses to help at all, and is also not sending troops, leading to Wrath calling him weak-willed and indecisive. But somehow, even without that, it all comes together. They even have Imperial banners made by White, so they can pretend to be part of the Imperial army. And that is all due to the efforts of the Pontiff, a man that Wrath is in utter and complete awe of. He, much like Wrath, has committed an unforgivable amount of sins. He has taken countless lives, and he has chosen a path of... I can't really even say redemption, because he doesn't want that. He doesn't want to be redeemed. He doesn't feel he deserves it, much like Wrath. And instead, his path is one of endless atonement. He is making up for his sins by continuing to press forward, causing him to accumulate even more sins they must atone for by continuing to press forward. It is a never-ending cycle that is both for the good of the world and his own form of self-punishment. And Wrath decides, this is it. This is how I want to live my life, serving the greater good. Forward, always forward. I won't ever stop again. And this feels very appropriate for Wrath's story, as he's a character who has always sought meaning and purpose. And the Eternal Atonement Plan will provide that to him. He won't let the lives he's taken be in vain, even if it means he has to murder thousands more with his own two hands. That is the path he has chosen. Oh, and while this is going on, White takes over the Renton Empire. This ends up being surprisingly easy. While brainwashing is a very slow process, the Empire itself is just massively, overwhelmingly corrupt. Or more accurately, it became massively corrupt after a few decades of not fighting the demons. Basically, the politicians kicked all the generals out of the capital, and the Sword King lost all authority. So White was able to basically just bribe people into following Hugo, though we should have Hugo brainwash his own father, the Sword King, which, she felt a little bit bad about, but, it's his own fault for not raising Hugo better. And I guess it's also kind of Sir Tiva's fault for dying, since he was supposed to raise Hugo, and he probably would have done a fairly good job given, how he kind of raised Julius. Very sad. Very, very sad. But anyway, though, back in the kingdom, White has arranged for Shun's brother Leston, his maid, and Kanata's parents to be executed. And she's doing this for a few different reasons, not just because, she is overwhelmingly evil. First off, she wants to keep Shun busy while she deals with the elves. Secondly, she really wants Shun to max out his taboo skill and learn the dark, horrible truth of the world. Because this will mean that, maybe Shun will be on her side if he knows what's really going on. And finally, she's just really curious about what will happen if somebody who's being controlled by Potamus is killed and revived. And it turns out the experiment was a success. Huzzah! All four of them are completely free to Potamus's control, and White is somewhat hopeful the same thing will work on Miss Oka. Though, because she's an elf, the control is much stronger, so she's not really sure. Plus, she really doesn't want to kill Miss Oka. Even if Shun can bring her back to life. Or White. Yeah, that's another weird little detail here. Turns out White can also raise the dead, at least while she's inside the system. That's being a god right there. That is an absolute and complete god move right there. Holy mother of God, White. Oh, you are insane. You are so insane. But anyway, though, before this whole rescue operation takes place, Elder Ronan appears at the castle, and White is a bit confused by this. At first thinks, okay, he's here to help Shun because he was the teacher of Shun's brother. But instead, he then starts firing at Shun from a few miles away with incredibly long-range magic with an insane level of accuracy. And of course, knowing Elder Ronan, it's obvious, oh, this is his way of testing Shun to see what he's really capable of. But this just seriously ticked off White, who was afraid that Shun would run away. But thankfully he did not, and even managed to pass the old man's test. Huzzah! And then just, oh my god, this next freaking chapter, seriously. I said at the start of this video, this volume contains one of the best twists in this entire freaking series, and I meant it. I know the whole D is Hirokaba thing gets the most attention, and it definitely deserves it. The level of foreshadowing that got was completely ridiculous. Even the title of this series can be considered foreshadowing. Soma Spider? So what? That's how White felt after learning that she had always been a spider. She didn't care. She was the same person before as she was after. She just got a little bit better at talking. And honestly, Hiro Wakaba was always a lie. That's been obvious since Volume 1. Her classmates viewed her as this calm, tranquil goddess, while White viewed herself, or viewed the memory she had of being Hiro Wakaba, as being a socially awkward nerd who couldn't hold a single conversation. So learning that the real hero was somebody else didn't really change anything. But this twist changes so freaking much. Hirons, the lifelong friend and protector of Julius and elder brother figure of Shun, is in fact black. He is a freaking god in disguise, or a fragment of a god's soul placed within a stillborn child. Either way, that's insane. Holy mother of God, that's insane. That means White now is a spy in the hero's party. Kinda. Because Hirons doesn't actually seem to be helping White at all. The plan was to keep Shun away from the elf village, but Hirons gets him there. The plan was to keep Shun from getting the hero's sword, but Hirons gave it to Leston, who gave it to him. So it really does seem like Hirons, or I suppose Black, is setting things up for Shun to kill White to avenge his brother. And that's honestly not too surprising. Black may be their comrade, but he's never been a big fan of their plan, and he's tried to kill White on like 3 separate occasions, and was only ever stopped because of D. But D is fine with reincarnators killing one another, so this might be his only shot of killing a god as dangerous as White. And this whole twist also has some other potential consequences, especially when it comes to the hero's party, because after this chapter, I'm actually doubting whether or not they all really died. Now, Julius is a goner for sure. I was working on this insane theory that White teleported him to Earth, and that's where he is right now, and that's because he was removed from the system. The title passed on to Shun, but yeah, no. White makes it very clear this volume that she killed Julius with rot magic, and she is still recovering from the damage it did to her. So Julius is certainly gone, but what about the rest of his party? Now, Yana was crushed by a giant spider foot, so she's probably dead, but the series went out of its way to have Hyrens keep Julius from seeing her body. Now, that might have been because he wanted to protect her dignity, but it is also entirely possible he didn't want Julius to look because there was no body, because he teleported her away before she was crushed. Entirely possible. And as for Jessica and Hawkins, we never actually saw them die. They were very badly wounded and bleeding out, but we didn't actually see them die. And right after Julius was killed, Black said, "I need a moment," and he teleported away. We don't actually know where he went in that moment, but it's entirely possible he could have gone to Jessica and Hawkins, healed their wounds, and then brought them to that valley where he keeps people whose souls are, on the verge of degrading, and is just keeping them there. That is entirely possible, and that is my new headcanon. I want them to be alive so freaking bad. And here's another potential point. If gods can disguise themselves as humans, what about Oral, the second apprentice of Ronan? She is weirdly good at magic, a true genius beyond compare. What's her deal? Is she actually just, a weird prodigy? Or is it possible that she is also a god in disguise? Is Oral secretly D? Probably not, but I'm keeping a very close eye on her. And yeah, so I just absolutely freaking love the implications of this twist. And while it wasn't as heavily foreshadowed as the White and D one, it still had its fair share of build-up. For one thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think we've ever actually gotten a chapter from Hyrens' point of view, which is insane when you consider the storytelling of this series. Last volume gave us chapters from the point of view of 20 different characters, including the entire hero's party, except for Hyrens, because if we saw what he was really thinking during this war, we'd know who he really was. Or to be, weirdly vague and ominous and just hard to read. Secondly, though, I've never actually believed his story about how he survived White's attack. He claimed it was because of a phoenix feather, but we never actually saw him take the feather. We saw him and Julius argue over who should take it, but we never actually saw the outcome of that decision. And even if he did take it, would a phoenix feather really be able to revive you from a god's wrought attack? Even the mercy skill couldn't do that, so not sure. Very much not sure about that. And, finally, right before the Phoenix scene, Hyrens claimed that he was in love with someone he could never be with. And for some weird reason back then when I first read this chapter, I assumed he's either in love with Julius. Yeah, I know, that was an absolutely insane theory with almost no grounding, but Hyrens was very protective of Julius, so maybe? Or if not Julius, maybe Julius' sister? Because it was mentioned, I think only once in the entire series up to this point, that Shun and Julius have an older sister who was married off into a foreign country. And, maybe that's the reason why Hyrens couldn't be with this woman. Yeah, no idea why I thought that, but now it makes so much more sense. He was talking about the goddess Seriella, who he can't be with because she sacrificed herself for the entire world. Oh, I love it. I freaking love it. And moving back to the present moment, Black is a bit less than enthusiastic about White's entire plan, especially because he thinks that she ordered Ronan to attack Shun as part of her sick game, completely unaware of the fact that Elder Ronan is straight up insane, which is rather surprising given that he once had a conversation with a man while he was completely naked and living with a tribe of spiders. Yeah, did Black forget about that? Did Black honestly forget about that encounter he had with Elder Ronan back in the Elro Labyrinth? I feel like even in his very, very long god life, that must be, fairly memorable. Anyway, though, because all this, Black decides he needs to go have a drink with a pontiff. And this, for the record, isn't normal. I know all the old people in this series have these weird connections to one another, but these two are not friends, and they can barely be considered allies. The Pontiff wants to save humanity, while Black wants to save the goddess. And while those two goals might align right now, that might not be the case moving forward. And we get a very interesting line in this chapter, where the Pontiff says he's never gone to Black for help, because he abandoned the goddess. And this wording is very curious. Technically everyone in the whole world sacrificed the goddess, but saying he abandoned her makes it seem like he had a bigger role in this, or perhaps he was closer to the goddess than most. I'm very curious about all of that. But either way, they decide to share a drink with the Pontiff bringing out a bottle he's been saving for literal generations. Just waiting for something good to happen. That is sad. That is just so overwhelmingly sad. Seriously, this man has gone through literal lifetimes with nothing good happening to him. And even now, nothing good has actually happened, but he has a very strong suspicion that this will be his last chance to have a drink, since White's plan is either going to destroy the entire world or save it. And if the world does get saved, the pontiff is fully planning to sacrifice himself and the church he has spent, literal generations building up, since humanity will need a new enemy to unite against, and he's the perfect target. He crowned a fake hero, he let an army of demons roam through human territory, and is about to play a massive role in massacring the elves, a race that most people think are, trying very hard to save the world. So, yeah, he set himself up to be the ultimate enemy, the final boss, the true demon lord. Oh, I love this man. I so love this man. So yeah, this really might be his last chance to enjoy a drink with Black. And he finds, much to his surprise, that Black likes drinking and shares his love of cheese. Something he was completely unaware of, despite the fact they have known each other for literal millennia. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And this actually starts a conversation about the early days of the system, because as it turns out, the system affected bacteria as well, and made it impossible to craft cheese and several types of alcohol for several generations. The pontiff had to work for centuries to bring cheese back into the world. Oh, I want to see that. I so badly want to see that. I want an entire spin-off of just, the world right after the system was first created, seeing everyone trying to adapt to everything that's changed, seeing them try to figure out, okay, so we can't make cheese anymore. What exactly are we gonna eat? Oh, that'd be fantastic. That'd be such an absolutely fantastic read. And in this dark, crazy, turbulent time, humanity first encountered the elves. And they seem then to be, a product of the system, like monsters, but designed to protect and support humanity. And with the pontiff's game-loving secretary even saying, "We did such horrible things to the gods, and yet they will not forsake us." Oh, you poor fool, you poor fool. As it was not until many years later the pontiff realized, oh, Eponymous created the elves. Oh, the elves are super evil. Oh no. I have made so many mistakes. I have made so many mistakes. Oh, poor pontiff. But anyway, though, speaking of Eponymous, the pontiff is a bit confused about him because his actions of late have been strange, very strange. He's making these huge, reckless moves and just failing over and over again, which just isn't like him. I mean, sure, he is insanely petty, but he's never acted this brashly before, and the pontiff has to wonder if something has spooked him, if there's something he's afraid of. I'm not exactly sure what. I mean, maybe he just knows the world is ending, it's running out of energy, and it's all going to collapse, and he's trying to escape or, become a god. Or maybe he's just afraid of Dee. I mean, he did try to kill her for some reason, using the previous hero and demon lord, so yeah. There is a very good chance that she is mad at him. Oh no. Oh no. And as for White, the pontiff describes her as an all-consuming flood that swallows everything in its path, a great deluge that will wash away that which has stood still in this world for so long, leaving empty land in its place. And this feels pretty appropriate. I mean, this entire world has basically been a stalemate for literal centuries until she showed up. I mean, I think that's the reason why Dee brought over, the entire class. She wanted to see them spice up the world. She wanted to see them entertain her. And White has certainly exceeded those expectations. But speaking of White, right now she's busy having her 10th army kill every single elf outside their village, while also keeping an eye on Shun, who for some reason has decided to go to the elf village. And White, she really can't figure out why. I mean, yes, he wants to defeat Hugo, but, Sophia just kicked their butts very badly. They know they have absolutely no chance of beating her, no chance of really turning the tides in this battle, So why exactly are they going there? And furthermore, there's an entire freaking civil war going on in his own country. Doesn't he want to, stay behind to do something about that? I mean, he is a prince after all. But nope, instead Shun decides to go to the Great Elbow Labyrinth. And he gets there very quickly, despite White trying everything in her power to stop them. And he even has a veteran guide, good old Bagsgath, who's one of the first people to ever discover White. A fact he takes a lot of pride in, despite the fact that, he just ran away back then. And White was so much weaker than she is, right now, or even back in her Arachne form. And then Shun ends up fighting an Earth Dragon, something that seemed very random back in Volume 4, but which makes a lot more sense now that we know about Hyrens' true identity. He probably teleported and forcibly evolved the Earthworm into an Earth Dragon to give Shun the experience and the Dragon Slayer title. Which, is just a little bit messed up, given the fact that Black is basically the father of all dragonkind. He basically just sacrificed his child to make Shun just a little bit stronger. Oh, that is sad. That is very, very sad. Anyway, though, then the nightmare vestige show up and start speaking very cryptically. Proclamation, pronouncement, the beginning of the end, the world begins, the world ends. And everybody is, very confused by all of this, especially White, who never ordered them to say any of this. And she quickly realizes they were just trying to be cool and edgy, and once they're out of sight, they start jumping up and down excitedly. So, yeah, weird. Very, very weird. Oh, I love White's children. Anyway, though, then we flash over to Sue, who's had a very interesting couple of years, and as it turns out, she's not actually being brainwashed, except for one brief period where she was being brainwashed. It's kind of confusing, but basically, after Hugo tried to kill Shun and Miss Oka stripped him of his skills, Sue snuck into his room to murder him! Which, yeah, makes sense. That was a very smart move on your part, Sue. You should have done it. You should have absolutely killed him. But then she saw White putting a spider in his brain to control him, and she realized very quickly that she had absolutely no chance of killing White, as she was a truly powerful and evil god. And White realized that Sue was incredibly talented and had been able to keep up with Shun despite not being reincarnated, so she made a deal with her. If Sue follows White's orders, then White won't hurt Shun. Of course, White was never actually planning on hurting Shun, but Sue didn't know that, so it seemed like a really good deal to her. And even sweeten that deal, if Sue is able to attain a ruler class skill, one of the 7 deadly sin skills or one of the 7 heavenly virtue skills, White will guarantee your brother's freedom and safety and set her free. But unfortunately for Sue, getting one of those skills is insanely hard. Though given the fact that she wants everybody in the world to die except for her and her brother, I'm guessing she's pretty close to obtaining one of the 7 deadly sin skills. And right now the only 2 left are Sloth and Pride, and given that she describes Sophia and Hugo as garbage masquerading as people, I'm going to say she'll probably end up with the Pride skill. But anyway, though, like I said, she was briefly brainwashed, and that was during the period where she killed her own father and framed her brother. I honestly think this is something she probably would have done without the compulsion, but this was apparently a sort of half-hearted kindness from White, so she wouldn't blame herself, which is kinda nice, I guess. I mean, yes, I'm forcing you to kill your own father, but I'm not actually forcing you to deal with the guilt of it. God, White's messed up. White is seriously messed up. And to really drive this point home, the chapter ends with Sophia explaining that Master would never take a truly decent person under her wing. Obviously, she picks and chooses so that she won't feel too bad if they have to suffer a little bit. Holy mother of God, that is dark. That is just so overwhelmingly dark, and I freaking love it. And as for her master, I mean, she has been pretty busy. First off, she had to train, the entire 10th Army, and now she has to, spend time locating all the elves across the world for them to kill. But she's also been improving her mini-me's. They're still the same size, but they are stealthier, immune to detection, and can transmit sights and sounds. So they are still, really, really weak and are very easily crushed. And then there are her battle clones, who come in many shapes and sizes. First off, we have the Zanahoroa. I've never been able to pronounce that. Who are basically as strong as White was when she was in that form, shortly before evolving into an arachne. And she has a lot of these dudes, though apparently the exact number is a closely guarded military secret. Then we have the Queen clones, nearly perfect recreations of Mother. Though they're only about as strong as the Zanaharwa clones, their huge bodies make them way more deadly and way more expensive, so White's only made a few of them. And finally, there are the Space Specialist clones. They're tiny, only about the size of the mini-me's, but they can create dimensions, erode the fabric of space, and slice through space to cut off someone's head from their body, and there is absolutely no way to counter them within the system. So yeah, these things are terrifying. These things are utterly terrifying. Oh, and then finally we have the system-related clones, whose primary job is to investigate and hack the system, and thanks to them, White has learned there is in fact a self-destruct program in the system, but it's locked behind a secret menu that can only be accessed by all 14 rulers working together, the 7 deadly sin users and the 7 heavenly virtue users. And this is, a pretty big problem right now, because there are a few of those skills that aren't currently claimed, and to make matters even worse, one of those has been claimed by Potamus, and he will never work with them. So White needs to basically pick the locks for all the keys she doesn't yet have. And that's going to require some major hacking, but just as she goes off to do that, Ariel grabs her, ties her up in a cozy web of thread, and orders her to go to sleep. And not just her, she orders her to put all of her clones in rest mode as well, because she is exhausted. She is utterly and completely exhausted. And after a while, White eventually relents. She snuggles up on her grandma's lap and takes a very well-deserved nap. And we then get the chapter, A Grandma Admires Her Progeny's Hard Work, as Ariel reflects on her own helplessness. I mean, yeah, she is strong. She's stronger than anyone else within the system, but she has been utterly and completely helpless these last few years, while White has been running around constantly and hasn't slept in God knows how long, all for Ariel's sake, and she is just so terrified that White will push herself to death, just like the first ruler of Sloth. And as she's thinking about that, she reflects back on the original rulers, the original 14, and how they did so much to support and protect her. And then after a very restful nap, White wakes up, recharged, and goes off to fight the system. And thanks to her ally, she already has 7 of the ruler keys, so she only needs to pick the remaining 7 locks. Unfortunately, the system doesn't like being hacked and activates its defense mechanism, just as it did back when she tried to erase the hero title, as 12 silhouettes appear, and as best I can tell, these were 12 of the original rulers. I'm guessing the 2 we don't see here are Potamus and the Pontiff, since they're both still alive. I was a bit confused for a bit because I assumed that Ariel was an original ruler, but maybe that's not actually the case. Maybe there was a ruler of gluttony before her, because, I mean, there's a thread user here whose style just feels completely different from Ariel, so maybe she was the original user of gluttony and Ariel inherited the title from her. That would make some sense, I guess, but either way, I have a fairly good idea about what skill most of these guys have, so let's go through the list. First off, we have the Speed Shadow, who just keeps ramming into White over and over again, punching, fast, crazy, mindless. It's pretty obvious that this dude is Wrath. He is the ruler of Wrath. Since it was said before that, the past users of Wrath are basically mindless. They can't use tools, they can't use weapons, they can't do anything. All they can do is just punch wildly and insanely. And for some reason, our Wrath is able to use swords. Not sure why. We then have the Thread user, who is White's equal when it comes to using Thread, and has detection skills, evil eyes, and is a master martial artist. So yeah, I'm not really sure what this person's deal is. I'm guessing they were the original ruler of gluttony. Not sure about that. But then we have the Mist Shadow, who keeps turning their body into mist every time White tries to attack them. And they appear to be a vampire, either like the first vampire that all other vampires descended from, or maybe just vampires were common back then. I'm not sure. And I have absolutely no idea what skill they're actually using here. And besides turning into mist, they don't really do anything else, so yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think that's a 7 Deadly Sin skill or 7 Heavenly Virtue skill. Anyway, though, then we have the Summoner Shadow, who summons and controls bugs. And while these bugs aren't very strong, they're able to produce a lot of them, which is really freaking annoying to White. Again, no idea what skill that would be. I mean, I don't think any of the ruler skills allow someone to summon bugs. That would be a very weird decision on Dee's part. We then have the Healing Shadow, who heals all the wounds of her fellow shadows. And I'm guessing that she has, the charity skill? The one that White had that she got as a result of healing a whole bunch of people while she was, being worshipped as a divine beast. I think it would make some sense. And then there is the Shield Shadow, who blocks all of White's attacks against the healer. I'm not really sure what their skill would be. My best guess is maybe like Perseverance, since it lets them survive off of MP after their HP is depleted. That would make a certain level of sense. The Barrier Shadow creates barriers that block conjuring. I don't think we've seen any kind of skill that does this, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of the, Heavenly Virtue skills allows someone to create a barrier. And then there is the Revival Shadow, who's able to raise the dead. So every time White kills one of the shadows, this dude steps up, brings them back from the dead. Huzzah! Pretty obvious they are the Mercy skill. Then we have the Commander Shadow, who gives orders and coordinates. Absolutely no idea what their skill might be, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of the Heavenly Virtue skills includes, makes you a better leader, makes people listen to you, makes you better at commanding strategy, something like that. Oh, the multi-talented Shadow, that one is really interesting, as it's swinging around a whole bunch of different types of magic and weapons all at once. Though none of them are all that strong, my best guess for this one is that it is Greed, since the Greed skill gives you some of the stats and skills of every person you kill. And as a result, if you kill a whole bunch of people with different skills and abilities, you're able to use all those abilities yourself, though none of them are actually all that strong. Oh god, then we have the Charm Shadow, who spends the entire fight trying to brainwash the spiders and White by striking like these sexy poses over and over, like, yes, love me, love me. Obviously, this is the Lust skill, but unfortunately it doesn't work on White because she is a god. And then the final shadow is just holy mother of God. It's something special, as it remains completely stationary for the entire fight, and then just as it seems like White is about to win, it attacks her with this insanely massive, overwhelming attack that almost destroys the system itself, and it does this by converting its entire body and soul into energy. So yeah, that's probably one of the Heavenly Virtue skills out there somewhere, And that's something White definitely needs to be worried about because that skill came very close to killing her. And as for the fight itself, I mean, White is insanely strong and is essentially immortal, but the problem is she can't go all out in this room because doing so could destroy the system, and that would end the world very, very quickly. And so, like, this long, drawn-out battle takes place over many, many days, and White is absolutely bored out of her mind, because while these guys are strong, they are not stronger than she is, and she could very easily kill any of them, in a one-on-one fight. But then, just as it seems like all hope is lost, her scythe teleports into her hand, and she kind of forgot about it for a while, and she's not really sure why it's here, but it seems to have a mind of its own. And then she remembers, hey, this scythe has the rot attribute, and she cuts one of the shadows, and it disappears without a trace, so it can't be revived. Huzzah! And then after that, she very quickly wins and puts her spiders to work, picking the locks and hacking the system. So this is going to take a very, very long time. But before she leaves, she takes a minute to look at the goddess Ariel, and she wonders if she's actually unconscious or not, because there's usually like a really long delay before a new hero is chosen, but Shun was picked immediately, and that might have just been like Dee messing with them, but White can't help but wonder if it was Theriel, if it's possible the goddess they are trying so hard to save is actually working against them. Concerning. She's not sure, but she decides to bolt from the room and go kill Protagonist rather than think about it. Good for you. Though somewhere that same mechanical voice that declares every level up quietly cries out, "It hurts." Yeah, so the goddess is in a whole lot of pain, and somebody really needs to save her. Somebody really needs to save her. Thankfully, White and Ariel are doing their absolute best to make that happen. And Black is, kind of getting in their way right now. That's a bit of an issue. I'm sure Black will become their enemy down the road at some point. Especially because he doesn't actually know that White's plan would cause, most of the world to die. Most of their souls to be literally torn to shreds without any chance of being, saved or brought back. So, yeah, that'll be an issue. That'll definitely be an issue down the road. And yeah, those are basically my thoughts on Volume 13 of this series. But please let me think down below what you think of this volume. I know it was mostly like setting up the big battle in the Elven Forest, but it was still really cool seeing, Shun's storyline from White's point of view. I mean, back then, like, the demons were these awful, terrible people who forced Sue to kill her own father. But looking back on everything, I mean, their actions are fairly well justified. Very, very interesting. I mean, do you think they're justified? Do you think there was another way to, basically stop the elves, to stop Protagonist? Or do you think Sue had to kill her father? I'm honestly not sure about that. And also, how do you think the 12 rulers align with the 12 shadows? I mean, I said before I wasn't sure exactly where the vampire, the mist shadow, aligned with everything, but looking back, maybe they were envy? I mean, it would make sense since Vampy inherited the envy skill. It would feel appropriate if it originally belonged to a vampire. Not sure about that. And just, oh god above, I'm so excited, because once this video has been edited and uploaded, I will finally have a chance to read Volume freaking 14! Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be so much fun. Please let me know down below. And until next time, peace!